Good morning. It's Thursday in Kitsap County, which means it's KEDA's weekly webinar. Today is June 4th. And as always, we think we have some great content for you. So we're excited to welcome you and to join us. And as always, we thank you if you are viewing this as a recording. Please provide feedback in chat or via email or Facebook messages to us. We'd appreciate that. We welcome today Shawn Gilfedder, CEO of Kitsap Credit Union, and Jan Glarum, who is the mastermind behind the Pathway to Recovery project for Kitsap County Emergency Management. That is a mouthful, I must say. But we're excited about both of these. We think that's very timely information as we move forward in phase 2. So, and again, as always, want to remind you that KEDA has a ton of COVID-19 related information and resource links. You can always find it by following that very last header on our homepage, marked COVID-19, and you will find the latest information there. Teresa is great about keeping it updated. Just added is the recovery playbook that Jan will be going over today. The Kitsap Chambers put together a launch toolkit. We have a link to that. We have a link to the reopening guidance by industry from the state. And we have a link to Restore Your Economy, which is a project of the IEDC, which is the International Economic Development Council. So as always, be sure to check this. So before we launch into Shawn's, I just have a couple of polls as always. So today we want to know who is here today. So are you opening your office or storefront this week as part of phase 2? You've been open, you're not eligible yet to open, or you're continuing in phase 1, meaning you just don't feel comfortable or you would rather wait till things are a bit more settled before you move into phase 2. Just a few more seconds to give folks an opportunity. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. So the winner is people have already been open because they were considered essential, and some are opening and the rest are continuing, being a bit more cautious. And then I have one more poll. And this is about banking. So you can answer more than one. We're just trying to get a feel for what type of banking you are doing. Are you with a local financial institution, a regional, a national? Did you receive an EIDL loan? Did you receive a PPP loan? Did you return your PPP loan? Or you found funding assistance other ways through other SBA programs, the non-SBA loans from your financial institution, you just tried to bootstrap things with credit cards, etc. So give this a couple of more seconds as people continue to vote. I think Shawn will be happy with the number about where their main banking is.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to end the polling. And I'm going to share the results. So by far, the majority are banking with local financial institutions. So that's good. I think we like that. And then we also appreciate what regional and national partners can do as well. Equal number for EIDL and PPP. No one returned that PPP yet, at least in this group. So as always for participating. And now I will stop talking and turn it over to Shawn Gilfedder, CEO for Kitsap Credit Union, and also a partner of KEDA and a KEDA board member. Thanks, Shawn.
Great. Well, thanks, Kathy, and thank you, KEDA, for giving me the opportunity today to talk a little bit about how to create value and gain a great relationship with a financial institution. So, a little background about myself and Kitsap Credit Union. Kitsap Credit Union has been serving the community for over 86 years. So it's hard to think about institutions that have been around that long and been of service to folks within the community. And we recognize that at times like this in crisis, that institutions that know their communities and know the people that they serve, can bring real value. And the focus of today's discussion and what I really want to share with all of you is how to best develop that relationship with your financial institution. So whether it's Kitsap Credit Union or another financial institution, and we'll talk a little bit about the digital economy and what that may afford small business. It's that relationship that you will come to rely upon when challenges are presented, not only to you and your business, but also the economy at large. So I've been in the banking industry for over 25 years. Started out in commercial markets and then worked for Wall Street as a strategist for capital markets department for Royal Bank of Canada, and then decided, as my friends described, to join the other side of the equation of credit unions. And I have to share with you that working for mission-driven organizations that are focused on the financial prosperity of their communities and providing convenience to individuals as part of that process allows me to go home and sleep well at night, knowing that we're doing great things for the community. So
Shawn, just a second. Maybe we're getting a little feedback. So maybe if you take off your video, it might help.
Okay. How's that? Is that any better?
Sounds a little better, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as we look at all financial institutions today, we have to recognize that not all institutions are equal. That is, in years past, you maybe go to one institution for all your financial needs. We recognize now that there are various flavors of institutions that are out in the marketplace. And with the recent efforts of the SBA and the PPP loan program, many consumers as well as business owners have come to realize that there are different types of financial institutions, and operating in that commodity space, you really need to get to know who they are and what are the pluses and minuses of each institution. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well today. And then as you think about, what makes a great relationship, every good financier, the 4 C's of credit, the first C is character, and character is the foundation of all relationships with an institution. So we look to build those opportunities with organizations so that we understand what their needs are, and my suggestion here is that you too should be looking for institutions of character as you step forward into what we're considering this new business normal environment. And I'll wrap up today with some highlights on the SBA's PPP program. yesterday Congress passed, some additional legislation. The program itself continues to evolve. We'll talk about some of the highlights there, but I'll give you a lender's perspective on the PPP program and some things that we're looking for in partnership with our discussions with all of you, so that we can all move forward together and get the full benefit of those program efforts. So, banking, back in 1930s, and I'm sure many of you, recognize this slide here with the Bailey Savings and Loan. Everyone wants to have a relationship where, they know your name. And we hear this all the time, is that, many of our members appreciate the fact that our tellers and the people that they work with, have that personalized relationship. And when you think about that is how do you establish that relationship? That comes with time and commitment. Here we can go to the next slide. So, coming out of New York, I've grown an appreciation for our local team here, the Seahawks. And if you ask yourself, what does a great relationship look like? Richard Sherman here and Pete Carroll, right? He gets traded last year, goes to the San Francisco, 49ers and gets to the Super Bowl, right? And I don't know how, Seahawks fans, feel about that trade. But what I'm sharing with you is that you have to prepare yourself when you're in a relationship, for changes and challenges and compromises as they come. And I'm sure more of you, if we go to our next slide, would like to know that if you're in a valued relationship, it looks more like this between Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll. That is, through good times and bad, you stay with that relationship and you learn about each other and learn about the processes that are of value as you go forward, through that relationship. So as your business evolves and as your needs evolve, you also want an institution that is also evolving along with you. Next slide. So we look at the fundamentals of a great relationship. On the left side are great relationships, and when we talk about great relationships from a personal perspective, we look at these key characteristics of teamwork, honesty, trust, respect, and love. And if you have those foundational elements from a character perspective, you have a strong foundation in order for you to operate your personal life from. Well, in the same sense, your financial institution is looking for those same characteristics of teamwork, honesty, trust, respect, and passion. So let me expand on that for a moment, and that is, from a teamwork perspective, it's really steeped in strong communication. That is, keeping that open dialogue in good times and in bad with your financial institution, so that they know, where you are as an organization. And many of our commercial borrowers over the last few months, we truly appreciated those that took forth the effort to make that first phone call to us and express themselves and their needs, so that we could prepare certain elements of change and help them with transition. And we have provided relief to over 10% of our $1.3 billion loan portfolio in the form of payment deferrals, forbearance, skip pays. So it's just those conversations and that relationship that we have. It's over 4,000 members and businesses have come to us and asked us for some form of relief over the last few weeks. And it's that relationship that I encourage all of you to work to establish with your financial institution, because you want to know that when that phone rings, that somebody's on the other end of that phone to be able to answer it and get you answers to those questions that you may have. We also find ourselves many times in really honest conversations, and that is, in a great relationship with your financial institution, you want that financial institution to tell you, what works, what doesn't work, what you need as part of that loan application, what elements, and I'm sure Jamie has much, to talk about in this respect. What elements as an entrepreneur or a young startup business you really need to have in place before you go to that next step. So many times we find ourselves having that honest discussion, with a borrower and helping them understand that you're not ready yet. And these are the things that you're going to need in order to effectively, deliver on those key elements. And having that trusted relationship, to have that honest discussion, are things that individuals and financial institutions are looking for. Being in that trusted conversation also allows us to respect those differences of opinion, so that if we come into a conversation and we recognize that that somebody may not understand, the scope or the depth of what we're asking for, we'll respect that environment. We'll look to educate, those individuals. So I would encourage you to, think about what that education looks like. And ultimately, in the end, we like to have the opportunities to work with individuals that share the same passion. That is, if you're passionate about your business and you're purposeful with your intentions, that makes a great opportunity for a relationship with a financial institution, because with that passion, we recognize that you as an individual not only know your business, but the expectation there is that you also know your numbers and you understand how those numbers need to be presented to a prospective financier in that equation. We go next slide. So as we talk about relationships, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about today's environment and what I call the digital courtship that exists. That is, 10 years ago, companies like On Deck, Prosper, Cabbage, Lending Club, you probably would have asked me, well, who are those companies and what do they do? All of them are trafficking, in the commoditized space of financial services. You've heard the term fintech, I'm sure, by now. You're probably curious, though, how does a payments company, incorporate themselves in my business? Or how does, a company that is aggregating in the marketplace, are they truly a lender? Or are they somebody that partners lenders with borrowers and is trafficking in the commoditized space? We believe that there's a home for these resources, but we also have to recognize, and we ask you as prospective borrowers in the marketplace to recognize that developing a relationship as you're doing this digital courtship in the commoditized space creates some real challenges along the way. That is how do you develop that trust, that honest conversation? Who do you have those conversations with? We think that will develop over the next few years with many of these providers. And we also recognize that many of these providers may not get to the level of intimacy in a great relationship that you would normally find with a local institution. So we encourage individuals to explore this environment, but we also encourage them to recognize that this environment has its own set of challenges as it relates to developing relationships, and on the surface they may appear to be expeditious, but in the same sense you may find yourself at the other end of that phone wanting to talk to somebody or wanting to talk to a specific individual, and that may be more challenging than you would initially expect. And we've seen recently with the SBA's, programming and the need for detailed conversations, these environments, if you have all your materials and you apply online, many of these environments were very expeditious in being able to execute, but in the same sense, we also recognize that as those institutions come back in and start to ask for forgiveness on monies that they may have received during these programs, there's another layer of complexity that is associated with that asking, and we know that those conversations are going to be hard to come by with some of these providers. Next slide. So, when we think about the level of change that has occurred, in any relationship, you'll be dealing with changes as both internal and external factors, come along. What you really should look for are institutions that offer you, great solutions. Here, I just, sharing with you just some data points on the U.S. 10-year Treasury curve. Back in January of 2019, which wasn't that long ago, but it may seem a lifetime ago, yields were 262 basis points. Today, it's 73 basis points. The Federal Reserve in January 1st of 2019 had a position where they were going to be increasing interest rates, 3 times during the course of the year. And then they had changed course during 2019 and had decreased interest rates, where the Fed funds rate now is trading between 0 and 25 basis points. So as a business, you have to recognize sometimes you have no control over these external factors. And what we're experiencing today with rates of high unemployment and the social responsibility for us to phase through the reopening of our business, and Jan's going to talk about that in a few moments here. We recognize that those factors you have no control over. So when you're in a great relationship, you want an organization that has the ability to translate and interpret that information so that you both can move forward with purpose and intent. Next slide. So rounding out here, from a lender's perspective, what's been top of mind in of many conversations here at KEDA is the PPP program and what the SBA has to offer. And what's been interesting here is that the level of communication that we have had with not only our borrowers, but also borrowers that were from other institutions, it helps us recognize that there's a lot of learning that is happening right now. And as part of that learning, in order to apply for forgiveness, from a lender's perspective, us as a lender, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the loan calculation forgiveness forms that the PPP is asking for are filled out with completeness. The SBA, we don't work for the SBA, but we're an agent of the SBA to be able to provide those services. So when you're talking to your financial institution, or you're looking for that great relationship, that lender is also in need of ensuring that you provide all the information that you need to provide in a timely manner. And you may ask yourself, well, why is that? There's certain key thresholds that this program requires us to maintain. And if we don't maintain that and we miss on some of those actions, the challenge then becomes, does the SBA continue to guarantee those loans where there may be some form of lender liability? And our history has been with the SBA that although explicitly they offer guarantees, exercising a loan guarantee is a whole nother animal, and it's a real challenge for a lender. And quite honestly, we don't want to find ourselves in that space. So, as we push forward in helping, hundreds of business clients in the marketplace, and other financial institutions are doing the same thing, we're all looking at these key dates and deadlines of supplying the SBA this completed forms, making sure that the calculations are all accurate, doing so within 60 days of the submission of those forms, and then anticipating at 90 days, from the payoff where the lender provides the SBA its decision. We actually have to go and opine on its decision based upon our initial analysis. So I go back to the need for communication and a great relationship. You as a borrower, you want to be informed of where your application is as part of that process. And then, with that, as a lender in this vertical, our notice to borrowers, we have to provide you with that information 5 days after we let you know that we've submitted to the SBA within 5 days of our opinion. So there are many dates and thresholds along the way, and things that you have to be mindful of as part of that relationship, and we as a lender also have to be mindful as well. So great relationships really require that you have that open dialogue. And just wrapping up here in closing, if you go to the next slide. Kitsap Credit Union, we're here to serve the community, and whether you do business with us or another finance institution, I can share with you, my team is just happy to have those conversations. We have received hundreds of requests. We've had lots of counseling dialogue along the way, and that's what you want, in your great relationship with your financial institution, is to know that people are accessible and they have the opportunities to give you the answers that you need in a timely manner. And that is our commitment here at Kitsap Credit Union, to be able to provide that level of service. And happy to have that conversation, whether you're a member of the organization or not. So with that, Kathy, I don't know if there's any questions.
Oh, yeah. So Jamie has just a comment. She says, if you have a PPP loan, you might want to review the just passed PPP flexibility bill, and the link is posted in our chat section. And Teresa will make a mental note to ourselves that we should also add that in our information when we post the webinar info.
Yeah, let me just give you a highlight on that bill that passed yesterday. So the bill raises the non-payroll portion of a forgivable covered loan amount from the current 25%, up to 40%. So there are various changes, inside of that bill yesterday that are advantageous for those that have received, a loan. And it also revised the deferral period for payback protection on the loan, so allowing recipients to defer until they receive compensation for the forgiven amounts. So I agree with Jamie. You really want to pay attention to what was in that bill. There was, we know Congress made their best efforts when they put it up, and now they're looking at what are some of the refinements that need to be made along the way.
Do we have an anticipation when the president will sign that? I guess we'll just keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, I would say right at this, at this time it passed the House, on the 28th of May, and we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, well, Jamie, if you could get a crystal ball, that would be really helpful. Okay, any other questions for Shawn? And you can always ask them later too.
I'm sorry, Jamie just commented, it did pass the Senate last night. So yeah. It is active.
But so we're just waiting then for the president to sign. I think Monica had posted that earlier. Okay, so thank you, Shawn. And again, folks, you can continue posting your questions because we always have time at the end for any questions. And Jamie and Monica are on hand as well to answer questions related to workforce or things that the SBDC covers, such as getting you ready for all these loans. So another poll. And this is from our next speaker, Jan, and he is asking if you would be interested in participating in other Department of Emergency Management efforts relative to establishing benchmarks for the economy in the case of COVID-19. And that would probably involve some surveys, maybe some webinars, and hopefully not a lot of extra email in your inbox. And we will work with Jan to get some information posted on that as well if you want to follow up regarding that. Just give folks a couple more seconds to vote. Looks almost like a 50-50 split, Shawn. So you're going to have some emails to check out or add to your database or however you are going to handle that. So that's great. And now, Jan, if you want to get ready with your presentation and unmute yourself. Then we will start. As I noted, Jan is the author of the newly published playbook for the county. So take it away, Jan. And again, thank you.
Absolutely. Hopefully people can see the slideshow as I speak. Holler
Yes.
if you cannot.
Yep, it's showing. Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can get it to the proper slideshow here. That might be a little bit better. I'll qualify this. Mastermind is a pretty big word. I'm not sure I would suggest I'm the mastermind. But my background is quite interesting. I'm on Oregon Disaster Medical Assistance Team, which is a federalized team. I deployed in early February to Lackland Air Force Base with team members to manage the first plane load of mostly U.S. citizens being flown back to the United States from Wuhan, China, as they went through their quarantine activities there. And then I came back to Kitsap to continue my work with the Department of Emergency Management. What's even more interesting, and particularly after the presentation I just heard, back in, I believe it was 2004 or 5 timeframe, pandemic planning was a big deal in this country, and I was actually working for the federal government with 2 other physicians. I'm not a physician, but I worked with 2 physicians as the lead coordinator of developing a pandemic influenza planning and preparedness course, a 3-day course that we provided for Department of Homeland Security. And we provided that training to public health and hospitals and EMS and mayors and private businesses for about 4 to 5 years, 3 courses a month typically. What was interesting about that is that I had the largest teaching module in the course, and I would make the argument that a pandemic is not a health issue, it's a societal and economic issue. And you can imagine how well that went over with the medical practitioners, but you know, I think unfortunately it's been borne out in COVID-19's appearance in the United States and around the world that it definitely is a societal and economic issue. So that might have been part of, and like I said, mastermind is not a good word, but that might have been what prompted me to suggest to our unified command working the Emergency Operations Center that we start looking at developing a playbook to help us get back on our feet as quickly as we can. So I guess we'll continue on here. You've all know that the governor's developed a 4-phase approach currently. You might also remember back in September 2nd of 2001, when we came up with a terrorism threat level, we kind of went with a color-coded system. What I found interesting with that system is that as soon as the color codes went in place, it was obvious we were never going to get back to where we started before 2 airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center. COVID-19 is doing some similar things in that when we get back to phase 4, which you would think would be kind of semi-normal, it may look different than it did in January of 2020. So it's just something we need to keep in mind that we'll be approaching things a little bit differently as we move forward, both in opening and as we work our way through the COVID-19 event as it is. So the playbook is following the governor's approach, which we have to do. And that's one of the challenges. And the slide set is not a slide set prepared to talk about the playbook. It's basically taken from the playbook. So you get a little bit of a feel for what is in the playbook, how it's laid out. It's branded with, in support of the Department of Emergency Management's Put a Big Foot Forward Towards Disaster Risk Reduction program, which was started last year, I believe it was. And we're using Bigfoot as an icon for that. So you will see the Bigfoot symbol as well in this particular document because it's something we can use for education, ongoing education, and it matches up with what we've done in the past. So there's quite a bit of information in the playbook. It's not just for businesses. If you think about the way the governor approaches 4 phases, yes, but he also talked about different categories. We had the high risk population. We have gatherings, we have outdoor recreation. So there were a number of categories. So I wanted to put everything in one spot so that regardless of who you are, you could try to figure out, well, what is my role as we move through the phases? Because I think that's important. If someone is in the high risk category, or I live with someone that's in the high risk category, my behavior doesn't change a whole lot as I move through the phases. That's also something I think that's important to point out is that we're currently in phase 2, which is great. That means we're making some progress from a health and medical standpoint. And as we move to phase 3, which of course we're already looking at, is how do we prepare ourselves to move to phase 3 as quickly and as safely as we can. We need to keep doing the things that have made Kitsap County an enviable county to be in from a health and medical standpoint. For example, there is nothing inherently dangerous about a movie theater. People are the vectors. I'm going to get COVID-19 from someone I'm around. I'm not going to get it because I patronize a certain business. So we, the public, need to do what we did to get us to this point, which is the social distancing, which is washing our hands fanatically and having access to hand sanitizers. Again, if I'm in the high risk group, I should stay home. And definitely, if you're ill, please stay home. I know that there can be asymptomatic people from COVID-19, and that's luck of the draw. But if someone is ill, they definitely need to stay home. So I think those things are still consistent, regardless of what phase we're in. We, the citizens, we need to do the same things we were doing before to avoid getting ill with COVID. That we do as we start patronizing and socializing more, moving throughout the system. The reason that's important is that the governor also put in place that Kitsap County needs to have the ability to respond to additional disease. No one should be surprised that as we start mingling again, as we open things up and we start to socialize more, there will be more cases. COVID-19 is not just going to go into the background, so it will still be there. Whether it gets to the point of community spread again is up to us. If that does occur or has such as occurred in other counties, I believe it was Spokane County, they actually had a outbreak in a processing facility, which can give you a lot of cases in a very short period of time. So Kitsap County needs to be well positioned that if we have an outbreak, we can respond to that. And the folks with the Department of Emergency Management and Public Health and all of our other players in the Emergency Operations Center, they have devoted a lot of time and effort to making sure that we are well positioned, that if we see an outbreak occurring while we're moving through these phases, we have the capacity to deal with that. And that's really important. Again, the 4 phases, and just point out, Bigfoot will be around, but Bigfoot will also be wearing the different colors to help try to drive the point home of what that means as we move through the different phases with the colors. Phase 1, the only reason I want to mention phase 1 is we lived in it for quite a while, so we got pretty good at knowing what we're supposed to do. Some essential businesses certainly have been continuing throughout this whole thing, and other ones were able to start participating in rebuilding as well. Again, I know businesses are anxious to get back to solid footing. Us, the public, we need to do the right things again. We're the real danger to businesses and their livelihood is, are we doing the right things as we patronize them and not potentially creating a greater risk of spread of disease? So we need to continue to do the things we've learned to do well in phase 1 as we move on into phase 2. Phase 2 has been interesting, and when I say interesting, that means from my standpoint of trying to keep the playbook updated. You notice on the cover of this one, it said June 2nd. So June 2nd is the last update. What we're finding is we're probably gonna have to update this at least twice a week. And twice a week probably will not even capture how many times during the week the governor's office puts out some new guidance. My own opinion is that a task force sat around a table and they tried to think of all the businesses that were out there, and they come up with a list on a board and they start coming up with guidance. And they probably missed quite a few businesses based upon the emails I'm getting as, hey, I wasn't included in this. Where does my business fit in this? What I will suggest they do, and I'll get to it in just a second, is that they go to what is the information, what are the steps that any business should take? So if my specific business isn't listed in the governor's guidance, I don't think that means that I'm necessarily not included. It may just mean that I need to ask the question, what should I be doing? And these are some of the things that are important. The safety and health requirements. We've all been familiar with labor and industries and what do I need to do as far as, bloodborne pathogens and fire extinguishers and posting things in my business. Obviously, we've added some new things. So these are those requirements that any business, whether I'm on the list or not, I need to meet these things. Sick employee plan. I think that's huge. We started that back in our EOC. I can't even remember when now, that before I even got in the building, I had to have taken my temperature at home to make sure I was not exhibiting a fever. Then I got my temperature checked again. And as we moved through this, even different parts of the building, I had to go through additional screening. So you need to have a strong program that if an employee is sick, one, the employee doesn't come to work, or if they come to work and they end up exhibiting some signs and symptoms, you understand what to do. Because then we get into the issue of potentially contact tracing and follow-up and things like that. We've got a great process in place, so don't be fearful of having to do that. But just understand that is kind of the new model we're living in, is that one of my employees may be ill, and what do we do now? It's no different than you send your kid to school and then you get a call from the nurse at school saying, hey, Johnny's not feeling good. Can you come and get him? Same kind of an idea. So there's training involved, and then there's this new term, a COVID-19 site supervisor, which that term didn't even exist about 4 months ago. Somebody that needs to understand a little bit more about the disease, so if employees have questions. So a specific safety training for that. As we know, it's not cumbersome. Washing our hands and social distancing is not tough to do. But understand the social distancing. How do we move amongst people as we get more of our freedoms back, and do that safely. Personal protective equipment is a huge one. Just had a meeting yesterday on personal protective equipment for businesses. So you need to understand what is appropriate for my line of work and for the tasks my employees are doing. There's pretty good guidance out there, but you just need to be aware of it. Sanitation and cleanliness, again, it's huge. It just means if I was cleaning a particular service once a day when I close the shop, I'm probably doing that multiple times during the day now. I just was in a restaurant last night for takeout, and at the counter they actually had a cup for clean pens that have been sanitized and a cup for the dirty ones, so you wouldn't get it mixed up if you had to sign a receipt or do something. So simple things like that. How do we make sure that we're being as clean about this as we can? And I think a lot of these practices are going to stick around. I know when I was doing quite a bit of traveling last year, you never handed your credit card to anybody. They brought the machine to you, and you put it in and punched the numbers and you took it out. You never cross-contaminate from that standpoint. So I think we'll see business practices change just a little bit. And quite honestly, I give the public a lot of credit that they pick up on this pretty fast and go, yeah, this is just how we do things now. Lastly, there was a government, the governor suggested that we try to capture the names of people that are in the businesses for contact tracing. That's all voluntary from that standpoint. So again, that's going to be a decision that the public's going to have to determine is am I that concerned about potentially becoming ill in a particular business that I want to give my name and contact information. I think that'll be a personal decision on whether that's going to really last very long or not. We're looking forward to phase 3. When I say we, I mean the collective we. Me personally, I'm not looking forward to it because that means there's going to be a boatload of new guidance coming out that I'm going to have to update the playbook. But I think it's important. And as soon as additional information is released, we will be updating the playbook. How do you know if you've got the most current edition? Look for the date on the cover. That will be your key to that. If you go to our Kitsap County Department of Emergency Management website, you will find the most current link, and also through Public Health, they will have the most current link to the document. And phase 4, again, I'm not sure that phase 4 gets us back to where we were in January of 2020, but it's where the governor has got to at this point. So we will see what comes as we move down that line. Question I think that has to be asked, okay, we're in phase 2 now. Well, what if we have a big outbreak? Or are we going to get our hands slapped and be asked to go back to phase 1? Personally, I don't see that happening on a county by county basis. I could see the issue if we see a large spike in cases in a number of locations around the state. The governor could make some sort of a declaration. But having said that, the behavior of the public is really what's going to drive if we have outbreaks or not. We still need to do the right things so that we can get closer to a normal practices of moving around society, patronizing the businesses that we've all been wanting to patronize, and doing it in a safe fashion. As I mentioned in the document, there's a lot of additional guidance available to you. We've taken great pain to only go with trusted sources. It can be a real challenge if I'm a particular entity and I don't like what the governor's put out, that I go shopping online for somebody doing it differently someplace else in this country or maybe even another country that's more in line with my business. And I say, well, why can't I do this? We're just trying to go with trusted sources so that you can defend your position of why have I chosen to do a particular strategy or tactic. So I think it's important that we try to stick with these trusted sources as best we can, recognizing that science on COVID-19 is still in its infancy and things will change, but we'll try to include those changes as we go forward. At this point, I will entertain any questions.
Okay, and Jan, if you want to, do your video as well as the other folks in the panelist section. So we do have a question. Are you aware of any government or industry groups which have published health and safety standards or protocols for house cleaning or janitorial services? This person is looking for something that they could create for internal and client use without reinventing the process.
Correct. Oops, sorry about that. Again,
so,
if
Kathy, I just responded to that really quickly too on the governor's website where they issue guidelines per industry. I haven't seen something specifically for that. However, within several of the guidelines for different industries, they have things to consider with respect to janitorial processes. And
they do, indeed.
So if Jonathan wants to reach out to me separately, I can try and point him in the right direction as to which one of those pieces. I've seen it somewhere, I just have to dig a little bit.
Okay, so Monica, can you just put your contact info in the chat, please?
Yes. And I also put the link in there to the website that have all the updates as guidelines are issued. They get published to that website.
I think that's actually a great question and a point on the challenge of there's so many different entities that I don't have a headline just for me, and so I have to actually search for, okay, well, the guidelines are there, but I just may need to look a little bit harder to find that. So appreciate you volunteering that.
Okay, and then Shawn, someone had a question about clarifying, you're saying all evidence of PPP expenses have to be turned into the bank within 60 days.
I'm not familiar with that particular one. I'm not sure if that was directed at Shawn, perhaps.
Yeah, Shawn. Shawn, are you still?
Yeah, so we have a 60-day window. So from the borrower's perspective for the forgiveness application, and for us to submit a decision to the SBA within 60 days of receipt of the completed form, the forgiveness form from the borrower. So it's just important that those elements are included as part of that form's completion.
Okay, Brett. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. If not, I'm sure you can follow up with Shawn, or if he's not with your bank, then follow up with your banker. Another question. So it's about sanitizing a work area after an employee has tested for COVID. I'm assuming they mean tested positive for COVID. Do employers take care of this, or should a professional cleaning service do this?
I'll answer this two ways. It probably relates back to confidence. And it may not be that they've tested positive for COVID. It may be that they're in the testing process. In other words, I show up at work and all of a sudden now I've got a sore throat and a headache, and we better send Jan home. It may be several days before you get my test results back. It kind of depends on, and this is the problem with the stigma that gets associated with this. COVID-19 is not a real powerful virus. It's pretty easy to kill. So I think any of us have the capability of using the proper EPA sanitizer, using common sense and cleaning the work area, and you're going to be fine. I don't think you need a professional to come and do it. That's my opinion. Now, having said that, if I'm a business, whether I'm a restaurant or a venue that has a lot of people coming into it, and word gets out that Jan, one of their employees, was in here and we think he's being tested positive for COVID, there may be a confidence factor. And the public may think that professionals can do a better job. So that is more about optics than it is about practicality. So from my standpoint, I think any of us have the capability of doing a very good job of cleaning our workstations. I would not tell a business that they couldn't use a professional cleaner if they felt the optics would be more important.
That's
to
makes
kind
sense.
of build on that, you know, it really is a matter of what kind of perception you want to put out there as opposed to the actual ability, because if you're using the right cleaners, then Jen's right, it's easy to clean up. I've also seen in OSHA guidelines and in CDC guidelines that if that area, if the person who tests positive in that area is the last person to use that space, and then that space doesn't get used for 7 days, then that area doesn't even need to be cleaned because the virus has already died. But you know, that depends on whether or not those areas are highly used or not too. So.
Exactly. I know a lot of businesses have tried to get employees individual workstations so they're not sharing, but that's not practical in all aspects.
A lot of moving parts here. That's what I see.
Oh, yes.
So, you know, kind of to summarize, you know, Shawn talked a lot about the importance of relationship and, you know, communication and sharing, you know, values and passion. And Jan, again, lots of moving parts, you know, stay current, you know what is possible. If Shawn and Jan have some final comments.
Yeah, I would just say we recognize that it's you know, it's a dynamic environment right now, and we're all looking, you know, to do our best, and you know, beyond the you know, the current environment, we recognize that business as new normal will take on a, you know, a different persona. As Jan mentioned, there's different ways of doing things, and we'll all have to, you know, find our pathway forward. So, you know, having great relationships at this point in time are really important.
Thank you. Jan? The only thing I would say is I think, you know, the general public is really anxious to get back out and start patronizing places. So we just all need to reinforce to each other those simple things of social distancing and washing our hands and staying home if we're ill. It served us well, and it will continue to do that.
Super. And Monica or Jamie, anything you want to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, Jamie?
No, I'm just actually trying to like quick check and see if there's anything, you know, new coming across the line with this new PPP forgiveness. The interesting thing about it, I think, is just going to be that with these new guidelines, people that signed up under the old guidelines are going to have to negotiate with their lenders to get those loans restructured if they want to, or however that would be appropriate to take advantage of the new potentially 5 years you can use to pay off those PPP loans, or the new amount of time you can spend the loans. So there's just a lot of stuff. It keeps, things keep changing. So
basically anything related to COVID-19 involves moving parts and unknown.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like what I try and explain to people. It's like they passed a bill and a week later they rolled it out, and now they're just trying to patch the holes, you know, as they go along. And that puts a huge strain on our local financial institutions, I know, and as well as the stress, you know, for the borrowers, and, you know, trying to do the right thing and to take the best advantage of for it. It's tough out there, and I feel for all of you.
All right, thanks guys. Next week, we're gonna talk about staying alive, keeping your business afloat. One confirmed speaker, we're working on the second. Sandra Davis will be joining us. She's owned several companies She's from Kitsap County, and she has worked in economic development. So we're going to appreciate her perspective on, what she thinks we need to do to keep moving forward. So again, thank you for viewing, whether it's live or recorded, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.